Hello there, everybody. Since I'm talking about a noir detective series, sort of, today I figured I would dress like one. But I can't really do that, because all I have is this trench coat from Blade Runner 2049 and this fedora, which does not match, but you know what? I'm committed. Let's go.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
The Dresden Files. This has been something people have asked me to get to for years and years now, and I finally got around to reading it. I only did the first 3 books, but, I'm not gonna read 20-ish books in a series just for one video. That's probably never gonna happen. And this series can be described simply. They are noir detective novels, except the detective that the story is about is also a wizard. So it's not the only book series to do that, but it is probably the most popular. See, it's a combination of the urban fantasy genre, where there's a magical world out there, but it's hidden and most people don't know about it, and it's combined with the mystery genre. But that's also basically what Harry Potter is. You know, if you ever actually go back and read those books, they're structured and written like they're mysteries. They just happen to take place in this hidden magical world. And I will fight you on that. And the Dresden Files is pretty good. Yeah, it's nothing spectacular really, but it's pretty good. It's got enjoyable characters. The magic is mysterious while still making sense. The stories themselves are mostly pretty short and punchy. The weakest part of all of the books I read is, well, the mystery, which is kind of a problem when you remember that these are supposed to be mystery novels. And that's largely why I would just say these books are good. You know, there's nothing crazy going on here, and to be honest, I'm not sure where all the hype comes from, but they're good, they're fun pulp novels, and I enjoyed them. Sometimes you just want an episodic adventure that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time thinking about and doesn't take you that long to get through. Now, these are episodic, but there are hints of larger overarching plot lines that will come later on, and there's hints at Harry Dresden's past and what might be going on there that we're probably gonna explore more in later books as well, but again, I only read the first couple, and I feel I shouldn't have to say this, but if you're gonna post spoilers for later books in the comments, mark them, please? I've had so many times in the past where I've reviewed, the first part of a series, or the first couple books in a series, and I've said, yeah, this part kind of bothered me, though, and then someone feels the urge to just put in comments, oh, well, actually, here's the explanation, here's the big twist that comes later, see? And they just put it in the comments.
Shut the fuck up!
Why would you do that? Just mark them, please. Anyways, back on topic, some people have told me that book 4 is where the Dresden Files really hit their stride, but if it takes 4 books for them to get over the hill, then, well, there are other problems. So, for this video, I'm going to go over the series, as far as I read, as a whole, and I'll try to avoid spoilers in that section, and then later I'm going to go into the individual books and explain more about what worked and what didn't work with them, and those parts will have spoilers in them, just so you're aware. My personal ranking for these are Book 1, Stormfront is the best, and then Full Moon, and then Grave Peril is the worst. I don't think there's a big gap between Stormfront and Grave Peril, but, you know, that's the best and the worst ones in my opinion. So, the first thing that you have to talk about when you're talking about these books is the protagonist, Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. Yes, that is his real name.
My name is Harry Dresden, motherfucker. Open the door. This is my neighborhood. Open the fucking door.
And you might imagine him as some sort of hard-boiled detective, and he does have elements of that sort of character, but he's not really like that, and I'll explain a bit more about what I mean by that in a minute. Because Harry is a private investigator who specializes in helping people with magical problems. And that's not a secret. Everyone knows he's a wizard. He advertises his business as being run by a wizard. Because the magical stuff in this world isn't really hidden, per se. It's secretive, so most wizards and fae and other assorted magical creatures do keep a lid on their nature, and they don't, live amongst humans openly, but Harry Dresden is the exception to that rule. And it's not illegal for him to tell people he's a wizard and that he can do magic. It's just frowned upon. And most normal people don't believe in that stuff, but some of them do. So there's a minority of people who understand that, yes, there's a magical world here. There's a division in the Chicago Police Department, like Harry Dresden lives in Chicago. There's a division in the police department that deals with magical crimes, with supernatural crimes, and Dresden is a consultant for those guys. And I do really like that, you know, because I think at this point we have all read 100, 1,000 hidden magical world stories out there, and most of the time the fact that all the magic stuff is hidden really doesn't make that much sense if you think about it for more than a minute or two, but this is a unique take on it, you know? It's just a different way of doing it. Like, yeah, it's not exactly a secret that you'll be punished if you reveal it, it's just the average person doesn't believe in that stuff anymore. And it does tie into Dresden's character as well, because by practicing his craft openly, he is driving a wedge between himself and other members of the magical community. And being a guy who talks about magic and stuff drives a wedge between him and regular society. So Dresden works as a bridge between these two worlds while not really being a part of either one. So it's not focused on a whole lot in the books, at least not the first couple, but Dresden is pretty clearly a lonely guy. You know, and the first book emphasizes that he is poor and kind of a loser, and by book 3, he's still poor, but he's also, it's implied that he's swimming in pussy now, which was a little odd. I guess I'll get to that a bit more later. But the point is, Dresden is lonely. He has a lot of acquaintances, but he doesn't have any family, and he has very few real friends. That makes sense for a hard-boiled detective. However, other than that, Dresden really doesn't seem like a detective from an old-school hard-boiled detective mystery. You know, he's helpful, he's a nice guy, he is funny, he's kind, and he's willing to stick his neck out for those who need him, even strangers. Like, sure, he get caught up in dangerous situations, mostly because of his job, but he perseveres because he's not just gonna stand back and leave others to their fate. Whereas a lot of old noir detective stories had protagonists that would probably have done something like that. Like, Dresden is a hero. He's not a brooding detective as you might expect. On top of that, he's really quick-witted and knowledgeable about magic and stuff, and watching him try to wriggle his way out of difficult situations is great. So the mysteries here are, like, fine, at best. That's how I would describe them. They're fine, but the mysteries also lead to Dresden trying to solve the mysteries, which leads to really crazy and fun action sequences, like Dresden trying to fight his way out of a mansion filled with vampires, or he gets ambushed by a demon while he's in the shower. Like, those are cool and fun. And sometimes he can blast his way out of trouble with magic or with a gun or something, but usually he has to be more creative than that. So this all comes together into a nice balance, which helps the action scenes, like, pop. And all that said, the books are written from Harry Dresden's first-person perspective, and the narration is mostly pretty good. Like, his personality does come across in the way he describes things. He's a smart guy. He has a bit of an ironic detachment to the world. He cracks a couple of good jokes, but at the end of the day, yeah, he's still a hero. However, sometimes these books do try and write the narration in a similar way to, like, old noir mysteries from, you know, like, the 40s and 50s, and when they try to do that, it doesn't work very well. Because, like, as a noir detective story, these books rely on tone more than most other genres. Like, the difference between noir and a regular mystery is that noir is just dripping with cynicism and dripping with dark themes. And a lot of you are immediately thinking, wait, the Dresden Files isn't really like that. And yeah, it isn't. But they kind of try and use the sort of language that sets that tone, and so it leads to this weird dissonance, and it just doesn't work as well as the writers and editors were probably hoping. Because the Dresden Files are much, much more lighthearted than old noir mysteries. Like, there's murders, yeah, but there's also a bunch of jokes, and the bad guys usually get their comeuppance, and like I said, the hero, Harry Dresden, is generally a decent guy who wants to help people. He doesn't have an ultra-dark past where he did nasty stuff to innocents and now he drinks to cope with the guilt or anything. He's just a detective with a trench coat and a hat. In other words, the noir stuff is just an aesthetic choice. Now, it's fine to have that as an aesthetic choice, but sometimes they try to recreate the noir tone via Harry's narration, and it's kind of weird. Like, sometimes the narration works. In fact, I'd say 90% of the time it's fine. It's just The last 10% of the time, Dresden gets weird with some of his descriptions and metaphors. Now that's a big thing that noir mysteries are known for, is that they have like narration, and the protagonists sometimes narrate things in a weird way. But the reason they did that is twofold. Number one, it's a convenient way to give exposition, but number two, it establishes an emotional distance between the protagonist and the events of the story. Like, yeah, this dame is crying because her sister is dead. I don't feel much these days, though. I'm like a slug with no powder. Pull the trigger and nothing happens. Okay, I was going for noir detective there. I think I sort of slipped into John Wayne at the end. Sorry about that. The point is, Harry isn't like that. He doesn't have that sort of emotional distance that these other protagonists do. So when he uses the same sort of metaphors, they aren't bad, but they just don't have the same punchiness that they would back in the day. The third book gets kind of weird about its depiction of women, too. Like, it's nothing that's a deal breaker, really. It just needs to be said because it did give me pause. Like, the first book is mostly fine about the way it portrays women. Like, there's one sequence where a woman accidentally drinks a love potion and tries to come on to Harry while they're in the middle of a dangerous situation, and that causes trouble. And it's kind of serious, but also kind of played for laughs, because Harry has to step in and be the big, smart man who saves this clueless woman in spite of herself. Like, dames, am I right? And that sort of thing was really common in, the 1940s, when a lot of noir detective stories were written and take place. And these books are, in some ways, trying to pay homage to that, but you generally want to leave the dated elements out of your homages, otherwise your story just feels dated, But that's only one scene, so it's not that big a deal. And book 2 is kind of similar. Like, it's largely fine. The women take kind of a backseat in the story, but they aren't written like something from 80 years ago. The third book gets kind of weird with this sort of thing, though, because Harry is constantly going on horny tangents about how sexy every woman he meets is, which would be fine if he did that from the start, but he doesn't. It really just pops up in the third book all of a sudden, and it was weird. And it's really not that bad. It only pops up a couple of times per book at most, but I don't know. It stood out, because if these books were old, I would just shrug and say they were a product of their time, but these books are only about 25 years old. Like, they're from the early 2000s. I remember the early 2000s, and I feel like an editor back then should have circled that and said, hey, Mr. Butcher, sir, maybe tweak this line a little bit. It just sticks out, is what I'm saying. It's not that big a deal, but it does stick out. And as I've said before, the mysteries in these mystery books they're not very good. I didn't like any of them. Like book 1, there's a magical murder that Dresden looks into. He talks to some elements in the criminal underworld, and he doesn't really get any evidence about what's going on, and then he gets into trouble, and then he gets out of trouble a few times. A few people try to kill him, and then the answer is just kind of given to him, and then there's a big climax. And book 2 is very similar. There's introduction to the mystery, a bunch of danger and action, and then the climax. There's not a whole lot of actually solving the mystery. Now, book 3 handles this a bit better. It has a lot more twists and turns, because Dresden finds information and decides that he knows what's going on, but then he winds up getting proven wrong, kind of, and it's actually something else that's going on. And there are other parties involved that, when revealed, they add dimension to the whole conflict. So the mystery is better, but there are other issues that drag book 3 down. And some people will say something like, yeah, these books really hit their stride after the first 6 or 7 entries, which is fine, I guess, but you really shouldn't have to read that many books in a row before all these problems get ironed out. One interesting thing that I do kind of like about these books is that they came out in the early 2000s, and they take place around that time too. And that's really the last time when Harry Dresden's lifestyle would have been possible. See, in this world, wizards can't use modern technology. Like, it breaks around them. Telephones, cars, computers, like anything like that, if Harry Dresden tries to use it, it will not work very well, and then it will break. It seems implied that technology just can't work if the laws of physics are committing suicide in their general vicinity. But basically, again, Harry Dresden breaks technology just by existing near it, but he's still able to function in normal society. Like, he doesn't really need to use computers or cell phones or any electronic devices, really. You know, he can pay his rent with a paper check, or he can look people up in the phone book. But you could do that 25 years ago. You can't really do that today. Nowadays, he would have to become a magic hermit living in the woods, which I think it's implied that most wizards are like that in this universe. So these books are a product of their time in a way that I find interesting. Because if you take magic out of the equation, yeah, there were a lot of people who were either unable or unwilling to embrace new technology back then, and they probably lived a lifestyle kind of similar to Harry Dresden's, but they were still able to be part of society. But eventually, technology just became more ubiquitous, and embracing it became mandatory, and people like that largely just died off, either metaphorically, in that they were forced to join the technologically advanced world with the rest of us, or they were just old and they died in a literal sense. I don't know, it's just kind of neat to me. You know, I like it when books are a product of their time like that. It's like looking into a time capsule. So anyways, I will now go into the books one at a time, and I'll get a bit deeper into spoilers and the pros and cons of each one. So spoilers ahead from this point forward. So we'll start at the start, which is book 1, Stormfront. Now, this book is not an origin story, which is kind of nice. It starts when Harry Dresden is already fully established in his life. Like, he's already a fully trained wizard, he has his detective practice, he has relationships with the police and other important parties. So we just jump right into things, and that's kind of nice. 2 events happen right off the bat. A woman named Monica hires Dresden to help with her husband, who is getting into weird occult stuff and he's acting strangely now, and the police also call him in to look at a weird murder scene. Now, at that murder scene, 2 people were killed. There's a mobster and a prostitute. Their hearts exploded out of their chests, and Dresden immediately looks at that and goes, yeah, this was some sort of magic. I wonder who did it. And he's worried not just because there's a murder, but also because the White Council, who are kind of sort of the rulers of wizards in this world, suspect that Dresden is the one who killed them. So the book is largely about Dresden trying to find out who did the crimes, not just because he's being paid to do it, or because he wants to bring them to justice or anything, but because he's trying to save his own life. And obviously, those 2 cases I mentioned at the beginning are connected. It's not that hard to guess, especially once we get to a little bit later in the book and we learn that Monica, the woman who hired him, was sisters with the prostitute who was killed. Like I said, the mystery here wasn't great. After nearly dying a couple of times, Dresden figures out that Monica's husband, whose name is Victor, is behind everything. He's making magic drugs and trying to take over Chicago's criminal underworld. And Monica knew about this, like she knew that he killed her sister, so she could have just told Dresden what was going on and he could have dealt with it right away. And I know it's a bit of a staple of the noir mystery genre that whoever hires the detective is not being completely honest with them, but they usually have good reason to keep a tight lip. Whereas in this case, Monica could have just come up to him and said, "Hey, my husband has gone mad with power and killed my sister. Please help me, Mr. Detective." Okay, again, I was trying to do like a 50s mid-Atlantic accent, but I think she just sounded Southern. I'm not very good at this. But if she had done that, then Dresden could have just contacted the White Council, a couple of them could have come together, and they would take care of business. So it's weird that she didn't do that. It feels cheap. That said, there are a lot of action scenes in here, and they mostly work pretty well. Like, Victor sends demons after Dresden, including some giant scorpions. He has a cool fight scene with one of them, and then Dresden confronts Victor, and they have a final battle. And the battle isn't just Dresden overpowering him or anything. Victor is actually very powerful, but he's ultimately an amateur in over his head, and he's summoning a bunch of demons that he can't control, so that winds up getting him killed. And then Dresden's innocence is proven, so the day is saved. It's really not a complicated story, and it only works, I think, because Dresden is a good protagonist to follow. Like, yes, he does get beat up, and he's behind the curve for a lot of the story, which puts him on the same page as the audience, but he's willing and able to kick ass when the situation calls for it, so he doesn't come across as whiny or pathetic. Like, there's one character who's tangentially involved with all this. He's a mafia boss named Johnny Marcone, or Marcone, I guess, depending on how you want to say it. And you know, he's tangentially involved in this, and there's a scene where one of his men comes after Dresden, So Dresden confronts Marcone at a nightclub, and he just comes right in. He blasts the doors off their hinges with magic, and then he publicly accuses a mafia boss of trying to kill him, which is a very ballsy move, and it's probably my favorite scene in the entire book, because it got to that point, and I was like, wow, Dresden can be a badass when he wants to be. I also like how this book does a very good job of introducing different parts of the magical world, even parts that aren't directly connected to what's going on in this book. Like, vampires are a thing, and Dresden has a spirit trapped in a skull that he can ask questions of. Those aren't directly related to the plot at hand, but those are just things that are brought up here. So, and all of these different things exist side by side without feeling out of place, which is kind of hard to pull off. You know, a lot of fantasy stuff will introduce one or two elements that make sense and seem fine, but then they start bringing in a whole bunch of other stuff later on, and they just don't really fit together, and it doesn't seem like they all exist in the same world. Like, an example of this sort of thing done poorly is Twilight. Like, in the first book, they introduce vampires, which, okay, that makes sense, that's totally normal. But then it also introduces that the vampires can sometimes read minds and see the future and stuff, which is a bit odd and a bit of a stretch. You know, like, you have to stretch your suspension of disbelief even further in order to buy into that. And then book 2 introduces werewolves, and later there's a complex backstory about their origin, which involves, like, evil spirits and stuff. And then the last book has a twist about how the werewolves we've seen this whole time are not actually werewolves, they're just shapeshifters. Real werewolves are out there, but I don't think any of them ever make an appearance in those books. And also half vampires are a thing. What I'm saying is, these all kind of feel like they should be in separate universes, and by mashing them all together in that way, it's just weird, and it creates this dissonance which prevents the audience from really getting into the story. And none of the supernatural stuff in the Dresden Files feels out of place in the slightest. I totally believe that all these different distinct entities and types of magic can all exist side by side, and I believe that they can relate to each other in complicated ways. So overall, Stormfront is a good book. It's a very good introduction to the world, and it's a very good introduction to the character of Harry Dresden. Book 2, Full Moon. Haha, get it? It's like a pun or something. This one starts with Dresden getting pulled into another homicide case where it seems pretty obvious from the beginning that a werewolf killed some people. And Dresden starts looking into it, and he quickly learns that there are different types of werewolves. So the mystery here isn't really what happened, it's who is the werewolf and why are they going around killing people. Much like book 1, though, the mystery is just an excuse for action scenes. And also, Dresden winds up being suspected in the crimes too, because I don't know, it's only been one book, we may as well repeat that plotline. And it's stupider here, because in book 1 they had reasons to suspect him, but in this one, the cops seem really stupid for thinking that Dresden had anything to do with what's going on. Like, the main cop that Dresden deals with is named Karen Murphy, and she's a woman, so obviously there's some sexual tension there. Again, noir mystery, that just comes with the territory. In book 1, she's ignorant about the magic. Like, she knows it's there, she just doesn't know much about it. And then in book 2, she finds a diagram of a magic circle near a dead body and just immediately arrests Dresden for it. Like, there's really no evidence at all that he did this or had anything to do with it. It's just drama for drama's sake. But that said, this does mean that Dresden is on the run for the second half of the book, which adds a lot of much-needed tension to the story, so I guess that's a bit of a double-edged sword. So there's a Chicago street gang that is made up of werewolves, but they didn't do the murders, they're actually being framed. It turns out there are some FBI agents who turned themselves into werewolves to try and kill Johnny Marcone, the mafia boss, because they think that he's above the law, we're never gonna get him if we just follow protocol, so let's take matters into our own hands. And then there's a big climax and the day is saved. Once again, it's a simple story, but it's a step down from book 1 because there are repetitive plot beats and Murphy is just kind of an idiot. Like I said, there's no reason to think that Dresden did any murders, but she arrests him anyways. It does help expand the setting even further though. Like, there's more magical creatures and more types of magic that we learn about. We learn early on in the book that there are 4 types of werewolves that all have names, but it's implied that there's actually a 5th type. because there's a character who shows up later named Tara, and I don't think it's confirmed anywhere, but it's very heavily implied that she's actually a wolf that can transform into a human. So that's just a different type that we didn't hear about earlier, and that does make perfect sense in this setting. Like, that's what I meant earlier when I said that the different magic all makes sense and it all fits together perfectly. Like, Full Moon isn't a bad book by any means, it's just not an improvement over book 1. You know, it's largely just the same thing again, except now we're expecting what happens to happen. And finally, we will reach Grave Peril, which is, again, still not bad, but it's the worst of the books I read. Like, the book isn't that long, but it feels long. And basically, it's a problem of structure. Like, there are too many short sequences that kind of blend together. Like, danger, we're safe. And then danger, and then we're safe. Okay, now we're safe. We need to prepare for the climax where there will be more danger. You know, it doesn't quite work. It gets repetitive and it feels stretched out. If they had combined 2 or 3 of those sequences, it probably would have worked okay, but they didn't, so I don't know, maybe another round of edits would have saved this. That said, the mystery here is better. It's still not great, but it's better than the first 2 books, because, in my opinion, in order to make a great mystery, you need to give the audience all the needed clues to solve it from the beginning. You know, obviously misdirection is key here, but you still need to give all the clues necessary. They have to be able to figure out, okay, it was that guy, and that's how he did it. A lot of mysteries are written where they reveal clues slowly over time as well, and that's fun, but in my opinion, it's not really a great mystery unless you can put the pieces together yourself. Unlike the other 2 books, this one begins in medias res, which is a welcome change of pace. Like, it has Dresden and a partner named Michael Carpenter, and they're hunting down a restless ghost. And they manage to stop it, and along the way, it comes out that ghosts have been kind of going apeshit all over Chicago lately. And then some more action happens, and then Dresden realizes that there's a nightmare coming after him and his friends, that's nightmare with a capital N. That's a type of demon. They feed on dreams and stuff, but it is later revealed that it's not actually a nightmare at all. It's just a very powerful ghost, and the way it came about is a bit more complicated. Basically, a couple months before the story began, there was a serial killer named Leonid Kravos, which is an amazing name, let me tell you, and Dresden and company tried to arrest him months ago, but then he committed ritual suicide so that, you know, he couldn't be caught, but it also made his ghost super powerful. And it also damaged the barrier between Earth and the afterlife, which is why there's so many ghosts going around lately. And if that was the bulk of the plot, I would be okay with it. Like, okay, yeah, this guy killed himself, now he's a powerful ghost, things are going crazy, let's stop him. But the nightmare slowly moves into the background of the story until the climax, because Dresden spends a lot of time fighting vampires and fairies. More specifically, his fairy godmother. He made some sort of deal with her many years ago, but we don't know exactly what it is, or how and why he did it, and the details are just going to have to wait until another book. And the vampires are just sort of evil for the sake of it, so they're not very interesting villains. So there's just too many antagonists that are all fighting each other for screen time. It didn't feel like a plot was moving forward, it felt like there were excuses for action scenes. Like, it didn't feel like Dresden was accomplishing an overall goal, it just felt like we needed an excuse for something cool to happen. I'm putting quotes around cool because if you don't build up to it, then it's not very cool. On the plus side, like I said, it does set up bigger conflicts for later, because this book ends with Dresden finding news that apparently the White Council is just at war with the vampires. Now, the reason that this book is the worst of the ones I read is largely just because of that. Like, it's longer than it needs to be, and the plot is an unstructured mess. That's not the only problem, though. There are other issues here. I mentioned before that this one gets weird about women, and, like, again, it's really not that bad in the grand scheme of things, but it did make me stop and go, huh? At a couple of points. Like, Dresden has a girlfriend now, whose name is Susan, but she's largely just there for him to be horny over and for her to get in trouble so he can save her. And since he's a pseudo-noir detective, the two of them don't get to have a happy ending. So she gets halfway turned into a vampire, and then she leaves Chicago so that she doesn't actually hurt him. And I don't know, that was just really cliched and old school, but not in a fun way. Like that sort of thing did happen in a lot of old noir mysteries. Like, oh, I have to leave you behind, Dick. I can't let you clean up my messes for me. Like, again, I just keep sounding Southern every time I try that. I promise I'm not doing that on purpose. And like I said earlier, Dresden just has a lot of weird mental asides where he mentions being super horny, which I would say that would probably be okay if it was in the books from the beginning, but they're not. So, like, you can just trim that out and it would give me less pause. It gets even weirder, though, because Dresden gets sexually assaulted in this book twice. And it's not played for laughs or anything like that. It's a serious thing that happens, but it's far less serious than you would expect given, the very dark subject matter. It just kind of happens and then everyone moves on. And then it just kind of happens again, and everyone just moves on. Like, I don't understand the point here. Like, general rule of thumb, if you can use something other than rape in your story, don't use rape. I don't know what else to say. It's just weird. I do, however, need to take a moment to mention Dresden's friend, Michael, who is basically a paladin. Like, he wears armor, he fights with a magic sword, and he draws his power from his immense faith in God. Like, the way magic works in this world is that there's energy that can be shaped by mental focus and willpower. So if people believe in something, and especially if a bunch of people believe in the same thing, then that can help warp reality. Dresden doesn't believe in God, but he has faith in magic that can protect him. So he has a pentagram pendant, which symbolizes magic, and he can use that like a cross. It wards away vampires, the same way that, a cross would for someone that has faith in God. Now, I've seen this idea of magic before, like the idea that it only works because people believe it works. Like, it was in the Broken Empire trilogy, but I've also seen it in other places before that. And it fits very, very well in the Dresden Files. That's why paladins and werewolves and fae and demons and ghosts can all exist together. And you can also throw a dude in armor here and it makes sense. Michael's kind of a fun character too. Like, he's very religious, but in a realistic way. He's a decent guy who believes that an invisible wizard created the world. Like, he's the sort of character that works as a sidekick for one book, and maybe comes back occasionally later. I don't think he would work that well as the protagonist or anything, but he's a fun guy to spend some time with. And I do just want to take a moment to say, though, that his name is Michael Carpenter. Yeah, the guy who's a really big fan of Jesus is literally named Carpenter.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
So, the Dresden Files is pretty good. That's it. It's pretty good. Don't have a whole lot else to say about that. Like, I think it's odd that the series got this popular and has lasted this long, to be honest with you. Like, the mystery aspect isn't very good, and it feels like it gets repetitive after just a couple of books. But if you're looking for something fun to pass a bit of time, this is a good spot to search. And maybe that's the secret to its success. Just don't expect me to become a mega fan anytime soon. Unless book 4 really is a masterpiece, but I'm not reading that in the near future. Like, that's all. Goodbye. Aloha! Thank you to everybody who watched this far. Especially a big thanks to my patrons, including my $10 and up patrons, who are 3 Cat Day, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Brother Santotis, Carolina Clay, Chaotic Entity 1, Chris Goldap, Lexi DeLorme, Lord Tiebreaker, Michael and Katie Hake, Mr. A5013, Proscriptions of Dwojang, Psych XS, Toa Michael, Tomioka, Vevictus, and Wesley. Them, along with all the other names here, I couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. If you want to get your name on here and also get early access to videos and exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else, consider donating to my Patreon page. If you don't feel like donating over on Patreon, you can also become a YouTube channel member. Did you know I'm on Cameo? You can get a shout out from me over there. You can check out my merch store. If you don't feel like doing any of that, then simply rating the video and commenting on the video and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, that works too. I appreciate all of you. Aloha. That means goodbye as well.